I am going to go grab this cheeseburger. Sure, a kale smoothie would probably be better for my heart, but for today, I'm going to indulge, right? Hi, welcome back to another Family Care Learning Podcast. My name is Will Savoy. I'm the Specialized Youth Permanency here at Christian Family Care.
And I am James Schlemmer. I am the Program Manager of the Youth and Transitions Department.
Awesome. Well, James, thanks for joining us today because we're going to talk about self-care. And to kick it off, or to kind of give us a framework, I was reminded of Luke 10, 27 in particular, but just that section on where Jesus is asked, what do we need to do to be saved? It says in Luke 10:25, on the occasion, an expert of the law stood up to test Jesus, which doesn't ever seem like a good idea, but he said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. How do you read it? And Jesus answered, he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And then love your neighbor as yourself." But I think this morning or today, whenever I guess you're listening to this, we're going to be breaking down those four aspects of heart, soul, and strength and mind in kind of capturing a holistic self-care regime, process, discipline, whatever word helps.
Yeah. Because I think we hear that term self-care, and a lot of times we're thinking about kind of how do we engage in taking time for ourselves. There are some kind of common tips and tricks. But I think really what we're looking at here is like Jesus said this was important. And so how do we take kind of this time that we're coming out of, stressful time for everyone, whether you're in ministry, whether you're in social services, really everyone has felt that pressure. And so really when we talk about self-care, like what are we called to do? And what does Jesus say are those core elements? Yeah. And so obviously we're not talking about like, there are times where you're going to need kind of additional support, right? And so we're not saying, hey, everybody just take a walk, read your Bible, and you'll be fine. There are real elements of this where, again, kind of everyone's stress levels have been kind of increasing over the past 2 years. We're all at that point where we need support of some kind, and so for those individuals who feel like they need more support, I think the first thing we say is like, don't do it alone, right? Like, Don't go this alone. Reach out, counseling services, I've participated in counseling in the past, but probably will again. Mm-hmm. And I think the key is like, don't wait until the house is on fire to figure out like, I think we may need to go talk to someone, right? Like, if there is, and I think a lot of us are feeling this, like if there is something that we need to address, don't wait. The CFC Christian Family Care has some great counseling services. You can reach out through the website, ArizonaFamilyCounseling.com, and meet with one of our counselors. Or if it's not that, a lot of programs have, a lot of agencies have like the EAP access to, that's a free resource through your work. But go talk to someone, engage in those services now. So this is more of kind of, what are the practical steps? What are the things that we can do on a daily basis, kind of to take care of ourselves? And like you said, kind of that holistic picture of ourselves. So.
Yeah, I think some of what I run into in my journey in self-care is that it's okay. Well, like you said, go for a walk, become a jogger or whatever. Or as coming from a Christian perspective, obviously like, well, spend more time in prayer of the word. And yet we see that in Jesus's four things that kind of encapsulate the whole of a person, the thing that we're supposed to love God with every ounce of our being. Some of these things can get neglected. So I'm excited to kind of jump in with you for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes it can feel almost like when you're feeling stress or you're feeling kind of that overwhelming sensation, a lot of times those things feel almost like a task list, like a to-do list, can almost increase. So really like, how are we engaged? How are we looking at this differently, even prior to, but also kind of in the midst of that stress? So I think kind of tackling the first point that he hits on, the heart, right? Like, so just looking at the heart, what makes us tick, kind of what is it about us that makes us kind of passionate? And I think that's the key, as individuals who have worked in social services and youth ministry, kind of those high stress situations. I think one of the keys is just focusing on that passion. What is it that called you to this work in the first place? I think is a critical component, because even just the two of us, we're in different places in our lives than where we started in this work, right? Like I know working directly with youth was really kind of how I started and what I was passionate about. And now in my current role, I don't get that regular interaction with the client. So really, like, how do I draw back to that passion, the thing that God has uniquely kind of tasked me with? And so, practically speaking, one of the things that I do, those stories that we collect along the way, and our program here has a lot of stories, and not all of them are great, but when those good ones do come, really, like, how do we collect those? So I've got a file on my kind of email, just where I've kind of tucked those away, and I've got a special file that there are times where I've got to go back to that kind of consistently. When I'm stuck in the day-to-day tasks or the things that are not my passion, I'm starting to feel that stress, going back to that file, reading through, like, what is the work that we're doing? What's the importance of it? And, it doesn't always have to be work either, right? Like there are things where in our hobbies, like, what is it that God has given you that talent for? How can we kind of engage with those talents kind of in the day-to-day throughout our week, to say, this is something that not only that I'm good at, but that God has gifted me in this area, and really kind of draw on that passion to protect our hearts.
No, I think it's such a good point. Like, I thought, kind of that question of, like, what makes you weird, I think is also a good way to think about it, because like when I think about like hobbies or things like that, like, I know people who were like, nah, this is just for me. Like, no one needs to see this. No one needs to look at the final product. Like, this is just my kind of meditative time with the Lord, or just kind of that maybe it's a creative outlet, maybe it's a sport or activity, right? Like, if you talk to anyone that's not on the PGA, they'll all say they're terrible golfers, right? So, I mean, there's components of like, it's something that you enjoy, that you like to get out and do, or that just kind of brings you life in that, I think is really kind of what that heart component is for us, for sure.
And then I think too, kind of on the flip side of that, right? We're talking about, like, what are what's the canary in the coal mine for you, right? Like, how do you know that your heart is maybe not where it needs to be? And like, who are those people that start checking in with you more often at work, where it's like, hey, how you doing? You good? It's like, okay, well, what am I putting out there? Like, where do I need to step back and really, like, evaluate? I think those things are important, because, again, we don't want to wait. We don't wait till the house is on fire to start saying, is there an issue with my heart? Because I've been yelling at people a lot, like that might be waiting too long. How do you take that inventory? And so then again, like, that prayer component is just, it can seem obvious, but really, like, how are you doing that kind of regularly? What are your regular practices to make sure that you're kind of testing your heart.
Yeah.
You know, those things that you pray for, pray about are often kind of the revealing what's in your heart. And so getting that before the Lord consistently and kind of ongoing, I think critical. So.
Yeah. Finding those triggers, those mirrors, those thermometers, whatever work, canary in coal mines of, when your kid runs up and is like, Daddy, put your phone down. Or my wife goes, hey, who are you texting right now at 8:30 at night? And I mean, hopefully at that point it's nonsense and it's just a group chat where I'm sending a meme or something to some friends. But there are those times where you're like, okay, like something is going on. Yeah. And it's more of a minor nuisance to the people around me versus like, hi, Dad, you haven't seen me in 12 years and now we have real problems, right? So finding those and being receptive to those too, I think are really good. But so the second component, that soul component, this echoes that like in Genesis where God breathes life into Adam. And so I think, as Christians, this one probably resonates, or like we hear these things regularly. Hopefully we have some level of active devotional life that takes place on daily where you're in the word, you're in prayer, you're in community, those kinds of things. And so we'll maybe not spend as much time on this one just because there's much smarter people probably to talk about some of these things. But I think in regards to I think in regards to prayer, one of the things that has been really helpful for me is I listened to a local pastor and we came up in kind of this idea in seminary and things like that is praying as a person. So if we look at like the Psalms as a good example, like you've got the range of emotions of like, I'm going to dance before the Lord naked. I'm so excited, right? And then on the other hand, it's like I am crushed and broken, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and I am broken. And everything in between. There's frustration, there's happiness, there's supplication, there's asking for things, there's thankfulness, there's thanksgiving. And so I think like being able to bring that component to the Lord, and it's not that like we're going to feel something so big that God's going to be like, oh, that's too much. Like I can only handle the good feelings, and it's just not like, so giving yourself the permission to come to God and be angry, to be frustrated, to be questioning, right? Like, I think that really, as I've explored some of these things myself, that has been very freeing and very life-giving of like, I'm going to be mad at you and we're okay. Yeah. Like it's not that you're going to walk out on me. I'm too deep in this Jesus thing to walk away. So how are we going to move forward together? Right. Like that kind of component.
And I think I feel that too when, like if my wife asks me to pray or it's time, like those, and it's almost like, I feel like I've got to change like my whole temperament, it's like, all right. It's like that can be that example of like, okay, maybe if I feel like I've got to be something different, or like, all right, let me prepare myself to go before the Lord. No, I mean, God is there. He sees it. And so he appreciates the honesty with which like, hey, maybe right where you are is the place to be praying from. So I like that.
Especially in those, when we talk about like in times of stress and things like that, like, again, it's not that we're surprising God with the things we're feeling and again, the other side is that like, and it's not that you approach time of prayer, time in the word with irreverence where you're just like, yucking it up, but I think, I definitely think there is time for that. There is time of laughter in prayer. There are things that are funny in the Bible. There are, so like being able to bring those things that bring you joy, that cause you to giggle before God, I think is really important. So, and again, I think when we talk about that soul care, I was talking to one of our mutual friends recently, but he kept going, like he just kept relaxing his body as we were talking about this. Like we couldn't quite quantify the words, but he kept kind of like limp noodling before God, right? Like it's that sense of like lifting a sleeping child, right? Where you're like, it's like a floppy bag of doorknobs kind of, like it's that I am so relaxed before the Lord. And there's a sense of security, which I know we talk about a lot in the areas of foster care and adoption, of being able to give kiddos that felt sense of safety of, you can relax. You can be here. You can bring all of who you are before me, and I'm just going to cradle you. I'm just going to hold you and accept you. And I think I don't get there often, even in my own personal life, but those are the targets that I'm aiming at for sure.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
I think some of the other components, again, briefly, obviously spend time in the Word, right? Like it's hard. That is the thing God has given us to nourish our life here on earth. And so to treat it truly as our daily bread, I think being in community, finding those relationships where, like you said, those people that know you well enough to go like, hey man, how you doing? Right? Like what's going on? I see these things going on around you, or like I see a change in your demeanor. So being known and knowing others in an intimate kind of deep way. Obviously worship, I think, we should always have those go-to worship playlists or those songs that really resonate to kind of drive us back home. And until I think serving responsibly, again, I think especially in areas of foster care or adoption, we tend to be potentially more doers, and so you don't want to burn the candle at both ends because that's not going to help you any. But I think being able to be others focused in different ways sometimes can, shake it out. So maybe you go pack food boxes. Maybe it's, I'm going to go serve the little kids at church, and where the commitment is a little less, but it's a different demand on your life.
And could be similar to like what we were talking about when we were talking about the heart. Like what is that thing that breathes life into you, and not the thing that they're like, somebody else at church came to you and said, hey, I think you'd be great for that. Like that type of service may not be what kind of breathes that breath of life back into you. Yeah. Good. I think too, moving on to the strength, I think this, as far as the body, like this one, I think again, similar to soul, this one may be the one that we are familiar with. And so we won't spend a ton of time going through kind of how much do you move throughout the day? Are you eating correctly? Are you drinking water, sleeping? I think we know those things. And so, but again, like sometimes that feels more like a task, like here's my checklist, and in stress can feel, here are other ways that I am struggling. Right. I heard things where like I'm eating a cheeseburger. Let me feel guilty about that. Right. Like, So I think for this, and just again, as people who have been in the serving field for the long term, I think what I have found is that it's not so much about could I stand to lose 20 pounds? Sure. And would I feel better? Would I be healthier? Sure. But I think what I think of are like, what are the daily practices that allow me to release this stress, that allow me to, avoid getting to the point where I'm now outside my window of tolerance, to coin a therapeutic term, but not coin it, just use it. But like I've incorporated just like those daily walks where it's like, I've got to get up from my desk to move. And it's as much for my mental health as it is to just like hear those joints cracking again. Like just, I haven't moved for hours, but drinking water, it's great. Obviously I love a good cup of coffee, but like, are there times where I'm intentional about getting away from my desk, getting to the water cooler, even just to spend that time in a communal space where I can have a conversation not related to my job. You know, those are intentional practices that we put into place. But I think too, it's about not making it a huge, like, if I don't get this done, I've failed.
Right.
It's really about like, how do I put these things into practice in the daily so that when stress hits, it's not a new, you know, it's kind of like those reps, you know, like we're putting reps in at practice because when it comes game time, we don't want to have to think about it. Like, what are the things that we're doing daily so that when stress hits, these things aren't the first thing to fall away? Because I think that's the concern. Like, you get to a point where if you look at these things as kind of optional, or like, oh yeah, when I've got the time, I'll go for a walk, you know, that would be good for me. If we're doing it kind of just haphazardly, then one, when stress hits, that's the first thing to go, right? Like we're like, oh, I don't have time to do these things. Whereas it's really about when stress hits, these are going to be the things that protect us. These are going to be the practices that are already in place. And so,
well, I think you brought up a couple, like two, I think really important things that I found is like one, like show yourself grace in times of stress and understand that like, yeah, when you're stressed or you feel overwhelmed or this thing feels like the impossible task, like what, okay, yeah, I am going to go grab this cheeseburger. Sure. A kale smoothie would probably be better for my heart, but for today, I'm going to indulge. Right. And then I think too, the other thing with this in particular is just consistency, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, even getting up every day or before you go to bed, like I'm going to try to touch my toes and do 5 push-ups. Well, yeah. Okay. Those seem like things that you could accomplish 2 or 3 minutes potentially. Yeah. And yet you string a bunch, you know, you take that one faithful step every day, you end up down the road a lot quicker than you would think. And so you're like, okay, well, maybe great. Now I'm going to, I don't know what's next after touching your toes because I've never been able to do that, but yeah,
we'll let you know. Yeah, when we get there.
But then okay, 5 push-ups turns to 10, right? And okay, maybe you're never going to be that guy that has the YouTube channel of I wake up every day, run 5 miles, and do 1,000 push-ups. Who's got time for that?
Right, that's more stress,
right,
in my life. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think to prioritizing it, like as people in the helping fields, as individuals who work or participate, serve in foster care and adoption, you know, we tend to be the ones who, as soon as stress hits, we prioritize other people and not ourselves. Because we look at it almost as like a selfish thing. Like self-care is not selfish. It's what we do in order to be able to do what
and especially you talk about
to.
Children, right? The kids that are in your life, right? That is the God-given parental role or caregiving role is to support them, to prioritize them. But removing some of those guilt components of, I'm going to do this after these kids go to bed. And sure, there might be a few dishes in the sink, but I need this 15, 20 minutes to recharge, to reboot and go from there.
And think about the model that we're setting for kids who potentially need to see what self-care looks like, that need that in their lives as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And to the overlap, because I was thinking about like, I mean, even just we've pulled or suckered in a couple of our friends to do some like races and things with us, or, you know, and it's just kind of that community component of like, I don't really want to go for a jog, but I'm doing this thing in a few months. And so maybe I should, right? But that, you know, again, there's no pressure. It's not it's like mild accountability, you know?
Yeah, they say a little bit of stress can be good. It motivates, right?
Yeah,
so I don't want to jump in the mud with people I respect if I don't think I'll be able to get out again. Does that drive me?
There's a little pride. There's a little pride on the line.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. This last component is the mind. So this is kind of the intellect understanding. I think this, again, I feel like the clinical team, the education team we have here at CFC can really give you, obviously I'm a little biased, but I really do, like as a parent, and even before I started here, like the principles that we are trying to impart, the goals that we have in building attachment through education and things like that, like they're all principles that my wife and I have tried to adapt with our adopted kiddos, even before I started here. So I think when it comes to the mind and a better understanding and gaining insight, I think there's a couple things that I've learned or seen or kind of know to be true, right? Is that one, I had a mentor say that just one insight brings a catalyst for change. So it was nice, and shout out to Pastor Barry if he's listening. Hopefully he is. But he was like, don't put the pressure on yourself to like, okay, I have to get through this 300-page book on how the nuances of child development have changed in light of early childhood trauma. Right. Well, I'm stressed. I don't need that. So finding things like podcasts that are 20 minutes long, finding short courses on our family care learning, just talking to people, support groups, like those little, it can come from anywhere. Or maybe you read a book, you're like, great, this one chapter is what I'm going to focus on and what I'm going to try to apply in solving this caregiving challenge, this parental challenge, this new opportunity to build trust with a kiddo that I want to show is worth their trust in some of those things. And so, I and then I'm sure there's a lot of learners out there. I'm sure there's people that are like, great, 300-page book. Wonderful. Yeah. Let me get it. But even with like Audible or like public libraries have free ways to listen to audiobooks while you're doing some of the other things. Maybe the 5 minutes from when you drop the kids off at school to back to your house, that's going to be dedicated to your learning time. Again, just gaining one little insight to get a catalyst for change in your home life or work life or, those kinds of things. So,
yeah. And we talked about kind of that accountability piece with the physical. I think this too is like, who are the people you talk to about this stuff? Because I think that it can be so empowering when you're like, I have a new insight and here's how, but I think too, it can be helpful when you are connecting with people and you're like, hey, I've got this new insight and I want to share this.
Right.
Who are the people that you are talking to about growth, because I think that's such a critical piece of like, how do we make sure that we're growing together? And I know that it helps me to feel like I've done something with this information. You know, I'm applying it to my life. If I'm sharing it with other people, the insight that they provide, it just grows, builds on itself.
Yeah. And then it's like that I'm going to teach component. Like there's some educational principle that is like, if you can teach it, then you gain better ownership of it.
Sounds
and I'm sure it's much more articulated better than that, but it's, but that kind of idea of sharing and looking to apply what you know, and knowing, and again, just giving yourself some grace of like, you're not going to apply it perfectly. In the application, you're going to learn some nuances, or you're going to learn like, oh, that's a really idealistic way to go. But again, if your bar is here and you end up here, you're here like that, that's going to work. You're going to be closer to where you want to be.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're praying for you in whatever role you play in lives of kiddos who are coming out of hard places. If you know someone who would be encouraged by two guys sitting around talking about this kind of stuff, please make sure to share it with them and help us get the word out. Caring is hard, and CFC is here for you.
Yeah, so check out familycarelearning.com. Again, the Arizona Family Counseling program. I'm sure there's links or ways to find us. cfcare.org is our mothership on the internet, so you can branch off from there. But yeah, James, this has been fun, and I appreciate you, man. So it's probably time for us to go get back to work and do some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Sounds good. I'm going for a walk.
Great.